Julien, good evening. How are you? How's Paris? How's Julien? How's life?
Good morning, Max. I'm doing great, as usual. Happy to see you, and happy to listen to you, actually. I heard you had a story, which is not yours, from the mailbag again, so can't wait to hear what you have to say here.
I do, and it's interesting. Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine, and this is kind of a fraud. There's not really an identity thing here, but he was a little nervous about sharing his name since it's kind of around frauds and scams. So we decided that I would just tell the story anonymously. He's shared some of the information here, but remember, I don't know. I think it was last year. It might have been even the year before. I had a story about a very official letter from the state of California about money. It was $500 that PG&E had, and it turned out it was a scam.
And you had the letter, and you showed
I
us
had
the logo.
I had the letter and everything. Yeah. So guess what my friend got? Almost an identical letter. And again, it was very official from the state of California. And it even had, I don't have the old letter, but it had the address of a house in Florida as the home address to reach out for PG&E, which is Pacific Gas and Electric, which is in California. So clearly that's a big red flag. But other than that, this thing is spotless. Now, he had a really interesting twist on this, which is he, within the same week, got a letter for his wife. And her parents had passed away, I don't know, sometime not too long ago. Also from the state, also from the controller of the state, same format, same information about an account that her parents had that had been unclaimed. This is the very real unclaimed property group in the state of California. This is a function of the controller. Is if somebody has money, they find out who's owed it, and eventually, if they do that for so long, then the company gets to keep the money. But there's just, that's what the service is for, which is pretty cool. And he gave me some of the details. Again, I talked through this with him a little bit, but he gave me some of the details. So the two letters, layout and format wise, letterhead were identical. The one that looks like a fraud was on a smaller piece of paper than the other one. I mean, it was down to this kind of detail in terms of the difference. And the other thing that he thought might be a flag on this was, one of them was from, we've got the names here. It was, one of them was from Betty Yee, the state controller, and the other one was from Maya Cohen, the state controller. And we're like, oh, okay, see, the scam, they don't even know who the controller is. Well, the one from Betty Yee was the one that looks to be a scam, and it was dated in December of 22. The other one was dated in January of 23, and there was a turnover. So that actually was correct, even though they were different. And he's not really sure about this other one. It is some sort of a brokerage account, and it is through Fidelity. My wife's parents had stuff in Fidelity, and this one has a legitimate business address for Fidelity. Now it's somewhere on the East Coast. It's not Boston, which I think is their headquarters, but it's not somebody's house in Florida. So it's kind of interesting. The reason why I thought this would be good to talk about is, and he flagged it a little bit. When you get something that's that good of a fake, how do it? Do you just trust neither of them? Do there's, and he's going to go call the companies directly and not go to the numbers that these letters are giving them, because those may be bogus. But both of these are massive companies that, one of our main things we talk about is all the silos. And he may call the main number and get to somebody who has no idea about collections from Cal, especially, in Fidelity and on the East Coast. So that's his conundrum. And I think it's a little bit of, well, I think he knows. I don't think he's asked any idea what to do. He knows what to do. But I just thought it was interesting, A, that he had such a similar experience to me, and B, to have two of them come. I think they came within a week of each other. And to have two of them come, one is clearly a fake, and the other one is mildly suspicious. So that's the story. It's kind of short and sweet, and I think you could see with the scam stuff why he may want to stay anonymous for something like this.
So at this point of your story, we still don't know how it will unfold, right? Your friend's story happened
Correct.
just a few days or weeks ago. Okay.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, he hasn't followed, and we could do a follow up and get that, but I thought there was enough need here just with the way scammers are impacting life.
I think there are two leads to follow with that story. The first lead is a pure, I don't know if I can say customer experience, the scammed experience, where as an individual, how should you react to this? How suspicious should you be? What actions, what steps should you take to figure it out? And then there is the actual customer experience, where this time you consider yourself a customer of that company, and how easy is it to check the scam. That story you talk about, the story from, I think that was last year, one of the outcomes, if I recall the story properly, was around how difficult it was to get in touch with them and figure out whether it was a scam or not, because they were not prepared for this. And we came with a suggestion that if you are a very visible company, and banks tend to do that quite a bit, you should be aware that scammers are going to pretend they work for you. And therefore, you should have either in your FAQ or section of your website or some specific training for your agents around how to deal with these things. It's understandable you don't have that if you are the local butcher. But if you're a company with a few thousand employees with a big logo that everyone knows, that should be part of your culture and processes. Now, having said that, starting with the first angle, I have received these two letters last week. What do I do? I think what you've stated here is probably the right course of action, meaning do not call the phone numbers that are stated on the letter, because if the letter is a scam, well, they probably didn't put the official phone numbers there.
I assume the point of the scam is to get you to call and to do some phishing and get some sort of private information that they can use to really start doing nasty things.
So I would probably start exactly with, and I would probably recommend with exactly what your friends seem to be doing, which is go on the official website and reach out to them. Now is where I go back to my traditional effort score, and is it worth my time? How much I make per hour, is it worth my time? If we're talking about $20, chances are I'd rather not call a hotline and be put on hold for an hour. But if we are talking about an account full of money, which tend to sound like the typical Nigerian prince that wants you to get his money because he died in a plane accident. But if there is really money, and it sounds possible, I would probably call them up, make sure I have the reference on the letter. Any official letter without a reference number, it is a scam. There is the only way for them to track this kind of stuff. There should be a reference number, so that even if that person on the other end of the line, does not know what it is you're talking about, if you're a reference number, at the very least, you should be able to say, look, I got that letter. This is my reference number. Regardless of the matter, can you just look into your system and see if that rings any bell? Or pass the phone to the right person and let's investigate a little bit. But I guess, yeah, the approach is right.
There's actually, you're bringing up an elegance to the scam that I didn't notice before. The letter's coming from the state of California, supposedly. And this is a state program. And so, when you call the company, they're saying, wait, you got this from the state? Hold on. They've got a plausible way to not know what that number is so that they can force you to, divulge a little. Well, help me to figure out what this is. Let's figure out how to get your money. Oh, you know what? Let's look. What's your social security number? We'll look it up that way or something like that. I think it's actually the fact that this is coming from the state, I think is actually, now that I think about it, a really powerful elegance to this, beyond the fact that there's a real state program that does stuff like this.
Yeah, so from a recipient perspective, definitely a tough situation, especially if it's tied up to your friend's parents passing out not too long ago and having all, the dots seem to add up, and therefore you're right. Suspicious, but you still want to investigate. Now, looking at it from a customer perspective, I still think any large company that is known to get people pretending to work for them and to run this kind of scams should have, if not a department dedicated to this, at the very least a section on their website explaining how to define whether it's fraud or not, who to talk to if you're suspicious about something. There should be an easy way to get confirmation. Meaning, if I get a call from someone, even with my credit card number or all of my details, pretending they work for the bank, the first thing I'm going to do is, after I hang up, I call my actual bank advisor, manager, whatever you call that, to ask, are you aware of this? Or is this legit or not? You definitely have to double check. And there should be an easy way. So if it's your bank, your actual manager should be able to answer this question. If it's not a bank, it's a larger company, you should be able to find the information on the website. If you don't, then the company is definitely failing here, because protecting their customers should be a main concern for them.
I totally, okay. And you inspired me. I just looked, and PG&E has a page, learning to spot scams before they fool you. And it's like a blog on their website. I haven't dug through that to see if that's really enough. Let's see. Fake utility bills, bogus IRS phone calls, green dot scam, customer overpayments, changes. So they have it. They don't have this situation there, but maybe it's rare enough that they would.
But here's the thing. It cannot be rare. Scammers are not doing handcrafting. They do...
Yeah, especially something that's sophisticated. Yeah.
So unless they're really trying to scam one specific rich person they've identified, chances are they send something somehow similar to hundreds, if not thousands of people. So if I was working for that company, I think having the blog, absolutely great. That the first step is great. They have it in place, especially if it's easy to read. They have examples, they give guidelines and all of this. That's definitely what they should be doing. What they should be doing next is, you're still suspicious after reading all of that, or you receive something that's not in the typical use cases we've given you. Give us a call or send us an email. It doesn't have to be a call. Give us a copy of what you received, because not only it's going to help them make sure they build a stronger bond with their audience, because they build trust, and trust is absolutely essential to any business relationship, but also they start collecting other scams they were not even aware of. Because chances are, if that does not exist, they're not even aware of half of the scams that are out there affecting their customers. And they may end up at some point, from the type of company you're talking about, I guess they have some level of monopoly, so they probably don't care too much about having customers or not having these customers, because hey, you're locked with them.
They have them whether you want them or not.
But you live in the US, right? So going to court and getting a lawsuit is pretty standard. And what is protecting them from someone saying, you were not clear enough, I've been scammed, you should have helped preventing that, you did not. So just from even that very simple perspective, they should probably do something more about it and collect feedback and examples from people and reassure them when that's the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. They do 6 or 7 paragraphs in here. They do have an email address to report stuff, but that should be, and there may be another, I haven't done a deep search here, but that should be thing one. That should be right on the top. And oh, by the way, here's a blog with some details.
So now the next step would be to figure out whether they respond quickly, whether the response is just, yeah, we've received it, or actual steps and actual guidelines and feedback. But it looks like they're doing the right thing. Maybe their UX could still be improved a little. The other question is, it seems it was easy enough to find that within our conversation, within just a few seconds, you could find the page. Is it easy to find for anyone? Because the best victims for scams are usually people who are not digitally savvy, or people who are elderlies that don't know about new technologies and how these things work and how easy it is to scam you. So anyone who would be somehow weak from that perspective would be the victim. And if those people are weak from a digital perspective, then making it difficult to find is definitely not helping anyone. But assuming it's easy to find, you get the email address, a web form is definitely much better than an email address to capture everything, but at least they got the basic things in place. So you might want to advise your friend to test it out, so that we could have actually a follow-up story on, was it a scam in the end?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll check with them, and I'm pretty sure this PG&E one is. The other one is the one that's interesting, and it was striking if one of these does turn out to be real. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that when you're talking about when you do these scans, you do them at scale. It makes a lot of sense that 2 would go out at the same time. What would really be surprising is if at the same time they got a scam one and a real one. That would really be unusual that it happened that way.
I was reading an article a few weeks or months back about scammers and people making fun, people talking about the fact that it's very easy to spot a scammer. I don't know how it is in the US, but in France, incredibly easy to spot because it's full of spelling mistakes. The syntax of the sentences is terrible. There are mistakes left and right, stuff that are outdated, all this kind of clues that tell you that can be real. And the expert was kind of explaining why that is. And he was basically saying it's full of mistakes because they don't care about making it perfect. Their target is not people who are going to notice that there is a problem. Their target is people who will not even notice that there are spelling mistakes. Right. And therefore, it does not matter. They don't need to make it perfect. They know exactly what their audience is. Here, it looks like your scammers are trying to make it perfect to the last detail, to the name of the actual person in the seat at that specific time. So it's a different type of scam altogether, which probably requires to have even more scrutiny before responding to anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's the level of sophistication on this one is kind of eerie. And I think that's a great point, that many of the scammers' targets are we're going to pick on the lonely old person. And, I'll get them on the phone and they're kind of lonely. So, boy, I can start chatting them up and I can get all kinds of information out of them because they're happy to have somebody to talk to. And it's just sad.
It is. And if I do remember, which I probably won't, but I'll tell you at some point a story that will be from my grandfather, who's no longer with us, but I guess I will tell the story on his behalf of a few years ago was a wine scam that was actually customer experience because that was a real company scamming elderly. So it's really at the borderline between an actual scam and a real company, and it's all about customer experience. I'll try to remember that for a future session.
Well, we'll get a mailbag. We'll get a letter from your grandfather here.
Exactly. Letter from heaven. Well, I definitely want to follow up on that one, if you don't mind, following up with your friend, and in a few weeks' time, once you get to the bottom of it, and if you could make sure that he sends an email also, so that we could have the whole story about the actual experience with a real company, see how they handle it. I think that would be enlightening.
Okay, we'll do that. I'm sure he's listening, so you are charged, and I'll also follow up with him just through email, etc., and we'll see what he learns.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today, Max, and thank you to your anonymous friend for sharing it with you in the first place. And I will talk to you in a week's time then.
All right, sounds great. Thanks. Have a good
Bye,
evening.
Max.